Oh, we're ready for this one. Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? I don't know. Yes, I think we have to be. Hi Spuds, it's Jamie. Welcome back to another video. First video on the channel. I don't know, but welcome either way. I'm very sorry for that pre-intro. I don't know where that came from. But today we are looking at transphobic TikToks. The TikToks that are transphobic. There's no real other way to say it. It's just people who post little short videos of themselves sounding very silly and being very mean about a group of people that do not affect their lives, and I have no idea why they're doing it. So I'm here today to watch those TikToks, obviously, and then call out what's wrong with them and why they're transphobic and why people shouldn't be saying that. I mean, they can say it, but it's gonna get called out and it's transphobic. So yeah, let's have a look at some of these together, and I hope you're gonna enjoy this video as much as you can enjoy a video about transphobic TikToks. Woohoo! POV, it's 2023 and you don't vape, you're straight, and you don't have gender identity issues. Ha, how hilarious.
This person just came into the bar and said, hey, what are your pronouns? You kind of look like a they, them. And I hated that they were right.
What you want? What you want? Say wrong pronoun bad. Say correct pronoun bad. What? What you want? You come up.
I think it was a joke. I took that from the person who was in the original video as a joke. I don't understand why it's been taken so seriously.
Hey, we're all in the same boat. Second lady, I mean, I feel you. It's like, wait, so you got what you wanted, but you were mad about it. What do you want?
I'm pretty sure they weren't genuinely mad about it, and also recognizing the fact that if there was a seriousness to it, what I would interpret that as being is a acknowledgement of like, oh, I'm really like, as a person in this situation, I'm very obviously LGBTQ plus in some way. But also, I still go back to the point of that came across as a joke to me. That's like oh, and I hate that. It's not actually like I hate that, how dare they? They weren't telling anybody off. It felt very lighthearted to me, and that people have just taken it way too seriously.
Y'all know J.K. Rowling is a transphobe, right?
No.
I see so many people on here still supporting Harry Potter.
Imagine just confidently sitting there, pulling that face and going, no, J.K. Rowling's not transphobic. On what basis? Please do show me things that she has said that are in any way trans supportive and not transphobic. And honestly, at this point, anybody who willfully just says,
J.K. Rowling is not transphobic,
I can think there is only one reason for that, and that is because you are also transphobic. But I do think if you can sit there and legit say that tweeting to like 14 million people that trans women aren't women is not transphobic, then you clearly have some transphobic views going on yourself as well, because trans women are women. And just there is something about people who are just like contorting their faces to be like, I am trying to look as confused and horrified as possible right now. Interesting choice.
Like, Harry Potter, yay! And I'm like, you realize that the author is a transphobe. Like, she actively says the most horrendous, horrifying, disgusting things about trans people, specifically trans women. How do you still support it? How do you still perform that music? How do you still read those books? How do you still watch this shit? How do you still talk about Harry Potter?
Sorry, I paused it mid-eye roll. I'm struggling to focus on what the person he's reacting to is saying, because I'm just looking at his facial expressions, and I'm like, if there is a way to be patronizing by just using your eyebrows, this guy is doing it. I'm very interested to see if he's going to talk at some point to share why he thinks that she's not transphobic.
You know that she actively is doing things to hurt the LGBTQ community. I love those things. I love the whole franchise. But I can't support it because it hurts my siblings. I can't. How do you do this? How do you do that? Do you just not know? Are you just willfully ignorant? Are you trying to say, like, separate the artist from the art? What?
I am so tired.
Me too.
You notice how when they make these little videos, they never actually mention anything J.K. Rowling has had to say about any of this?
It's really not difficult to find, but if this person is interested, here's an entire video I literally just made breaking down not even all of what she said that is actively transphobic and explaining why it's transphobic. In a short, it's very difficult to go through exactly what she's done because it's a lot.
That's because her position on trans issues is pretty centrist. It's pretty moderate. She fully respects the rights and autonomy of transgender adults.
The last time she said something like that I've seen was like 4 years ago, and she's actively donated to protest causes that go against the rights of trans adults. So
They never cite her actual statements. She's not the witch these folks have made her out to be. Not at all. But even if she was, like this dude hints at the end, you should be able to separate the art from the artist.
not necessarily, because supporting the art therefore supports the artist, and actually being involved in something that is created by and has somebody so heavily involved with who has caused harm is a very difficult thing to do. I can't look at Harry Potter stuff in the same way that I used to, because I'm just like, oh, JK Rowling. It just doesn't sit right with me. I don't judge people who can privately enjoy it, but I'm not interested in interacting or following people who have a platform and actively share. Even if they like will say, I know JK Rowling's transphobic, but here's me going to Harry Potter World, I'm not there for that. And I think people who sit there and are like, show me the evidence, it's like the evidence is out there, just Google it. Like, if you're asking for people to provide that to you, that means that you've not even tried to look into it yourself, right? So how can you sit there and so confidently say that she isn't transphobic and she hasn't done these things when you're requesting proof that she has? So that means you've not looked into it, because honestly, a simple Google search of like JK Rowling trans views will tell you everything you need to know. And there's very many videos out there that break it down. How can you expect every single person who makes a short video to break it down? Oh, for people to sit there and like with their whole chest go,
JK Rowling's not transphobic.
either you are transphobic or you've just literally not read anything that she said for the past 4 or 5 years.
How many genders are there?
2.
And they are?
Male, female.
But what about someone's right to tell you what their gender is?
No problem at all.
I really didn't want to see Katie Hopkins today.
You're going to tell me what your gender is, but in the world is less fucked world, I don't have to believe it. But I'm thrilled for you. Don't require me to think what you think.
Firstly, there are more than 2 genders, and it's not a new concept that there are more than 2 genders. And people who think that it is a new concept are just very blinkered to like Western view of gender over the past couple hundred years. But like even that is so like gender expression flips and flops as well, and people are just so rigid to the time they're living in. And it's just, no, if you look across cultures and across time, there have always been trans people, and there have always been people who sit outside the binary of being a man or a woman. There's always been non-binary identities. There are more than 2 genders. That's it. So she was basically saying, you can tell me what your gender is, thrilled for you, wonderful, but I don't have to believe it. No, you don't have to think how other people think, because I don't think how she thinks. I would not choose to be close to, be friends with, interact with people who I know in their head don't respect who I am. But the bare minimum is, sure, if you don't want to change your opinion and you don't want to see trans people for who they really are, you don't have to. But you are an asshole if you then discriminate against a trans person. So honestly, if you use the correct name for me and you gender me correctly and you don't use slurs, fine. I don't care what your personal opinion is. And if your personal opinion doesn't align with the facts of the world, and that is that trans people are their genders, then I personally just won't choose to interact with you, as long as there's a basic level of respect there. And I don't know. From what I've seen in the past, I would question as to whether there would be outward respect going on, but from that video, as long as there was like no misgendering, then I'm not here to try and convince you to change your mind or to change the way you think. That's something that you need to be open to yourself before it could even try and happen. Just don't be a dick. You don't have to understand things. You don't have to be fully on board with it. You don't have to see the world the same way as other people to be respectful.
Can men get pregnant?
Depends. I know.
What does it depend on?
I know trans men that can get pregnant.
That means it's a woman.
Hold on. Did she just say that means it's a woman? That means it's a woman. Just referring to trans men as it. Wow. And women. Like double whammy of bad. It's just a way of seeing the world. It's a recognition that as we learn more about the world, then sometimes what we thought was truth changes. And it is accepting that it's an old belief to think that being able to have a baby means woman and having a penis means man. That's very rigid. It doesn't take into consideration intersex people, and it's not in line with the knowledge that we have both as a society and scientifically.
Only one sex can get
That's a
pregnant.
circular argument. That's
It's not a
begging the
circular
question.
argument.
Yeah.
It's proving my thing. There is a truth, a concrete truth. You have to be born with a uterus to have a baby. Only women can get pregnant. The fact that we've arrived in a society
Right,
where
that's the
even
part I'm disagreeing
debatable.
with. That's the part I'm disagreeing.
And the way she's saying it, it's kind of basing womanhood entirely on being able to get pregnant. So like, what if you were born without a uterus but XX chromosomes and identify and live as a woman? What if you have your uterus removed? What if you never have a child? What if you can't have a child for whatever reason? Does that detract from womanness as well? Like,
That's the part I'm disagreeing
There's
with.
nothing to disagree with it. These are facts. So you can say that this person who is pregnant identifies as a man. That person was born a woman. I can tell you that every single time because only women can have sex. Because
wait, only women can have sex? What?
concrete truths about life.
Have babies.
Can have babies, pardon.
Oh, yeah, can have babies. Okay.
That is a hard truth about life. You cannot make that go away because you want to call a man, somebody who has a beard and dresses like a dude, a woman. Only if it's pregnant, I can tell you exactly what it is. It's a woman.
The way she was speaking was so muddled and so desperate in the way her argument sounded, and just entirely wrong. Womanhood and being a woman is not based on somebody's reproductive abilities or what internal organs they have. And there was absolutely no space there for trans men who have had hysterectomies. Where do they sit? And what about intersex people who have neither testes nor a uterus or ovaries, or have both? It's such a narrow viewpoint, a complete lack of acknowledgement that where we're at with understanding of how humans work is that our bodies and our reproductive capabilities do not dictate who we are as people or our identities. Trans is an adjective. So trans men are men who are trans. It's as simple as being trans does not detract from the fact that we are men. For transphobes to make sure that they absolutely identify away trans people's identities and try and justify the fact that, oh,
Trans people aren't really their gender.
what they're actually also doing is greatly reducing everybody down to parts and reproductive capabilities, and that's not good for anyone. That's something that feminism has been trying to move away from for so long, and make sure that women are seen as more than reproductive capabilities and body parts. There is zero questions of gender. He was born a boy, he is a boy, and will stay that way. I have seen this. This feels like a trend. I don't know why it's coming up on my For You page, but I keep getting these ones that are like, oh, controversial ways that I'm raising my child, and on multiple of them. And I don't think they're all a joke. People are like,
My child is the gender they were born and nothing will change that. Or like,
there are zero questions of gender. He was born this, so he will always remain that.
I'm like, that's a baby you don't know who that baby is. Like, it's just a bizarre thing to already be concerned about. It's like one step further that if your child came out as LGBTQ+ and you were like, oh, whoa, not comfortable with this, but you're like preemptively going, I'm definitely going to be uncomfortable with this. You're already thinking about it. And I do feel bad for those kids if they were trans, because, oh dear, I hope the parents could have like a growth in opinion.
This is nuts.
I was talking to a trans man on here, and it actually started off to be a very productive, respectful conversation. However, he kept referring to me as cisgender. And I politely asked him, like, hey, I would prefer to be called a woman. I find the term cisgender to be disrespectful to who I actually am as a biological woman.
Again, it is just an adjective. I feel like people who are uncomfortable with it, they don't understand the intention behind it and what it actually means. It's not a label that trans people have chosen to put on anybody else. It's not trans people going, yeah, let's call non-trans people cisgender. I mean, we could always go down the route of saying non-trans instead, because why are trans people the only people that should be othered? It creates this big divide. It's othering to trans people to go trans women and trans men and men. It's just relevant for certain contexts to go trans men and cis men. All are men, but there's an adjective separating, like old men and young men. And to be offended by an adjective that is objectively, factually correct is like, facts don't care about your feelings. It's not a slur. It's not offensive. It's not something that trans people have made up. It is a legitimate term. It's been used in things like chemistry for a really long time. Cisgender, cis as a prefix just means on the same side of. So cisgender is just a term to mean that your gender is the same as the one you were assigned at birth.
And at that point, he lashes back with, you're just a trans
I wonder what else was said though. Personally, if somebody said, I don't like the term cisgender, that wouldn't cause me to go, you're a transphobic bigot. But if it came along with like actual transphobic stuff, then I would question it. I've not met somebody, there could be people out there, I'm just saying in my personal experience, every single person I've come across online who's left comments or spoken to me or whatever, who has not liked the term cisgender, it's also come along with transphobic viewpoints and it's coming from a place of transphobia.
I find this very interesting because the LGBTQ plus community will demand that you call them by their preferred pronouns, but the minute that you ask for that same respect in return, you're transphobic.
By referring to somebody with the wrong pronouns, you're purposefully doing something incorrect. You are referring to them in a wrong way. Referring to somebody who is not trans as cisgender is factually correct. If you are not trans, you are cis. That is the only two ways about it. And if people do not like having a specific term, honestly, I'm totally chill to be like, all right, trans and non-trans. Sure.
It doesn't work like that. If you're going to demand respect, you should also give it.
If you want more of the truth, click follow or subscribe.
What did that guy add? Why was he there? Why was it not just the original video? I'm so confused. Is it a trend where people just post videos and sit and put facial expressions at them and don't actually say anything? Like, what was your opinion? I assume you're agreeing with her. I can see why people who don't understand the term or the use or the meaning and all of this stuff would feel like,
why are you calling this? I don't understand it.
But it is honestly rooted in a discomfort towards trans people because it's not wanting to be put on the same level as trans people. It's not wanting to have a label in the way that you see trans as being a label. It's wanting to make sure that you are seen as the real type of your gender because you don't view trans people that way. I think a deep discomfort in accepting the use of the word cisgender is rooted in transphobia, and to compare the use of cisgender to misgendering somebody is very, very different.
This might actually be Dylan Mulvaney's
Do I want to watch another video from this guy?
worst take of all time. Watch.
Like the articles written about me using he pronouns and calling me a man over and over again. And I feel like that should be illegal. I don't know. That's just bad journalism.
It's disrespectful. You're misgendering somebody. It's hateful towards trans people. It's discriminatory. I'm pretty sure, did a law not just literally pass the other day in Scotland that made misgendering a crime? It says online misgendering could be investigated in Scotland under new hate crime law. As well, to be there like, oh yeah, no, it's ridiculous to think that this form of discrimination should be illegal. Like, how do you think it feels to see so much hate? Like, Dylan gets so much hate anyway, and then to see so many articles referring to her as a man, that's horrible. That's like not appropriate or respectful treatment of somebody. I think it's fair for her to get frustrated and to be like, why is this even allowed? And then this guy's like,
this is the worst take that Dylan's ever had.
So a lot of Dylan's content is cringe, but I try not to hate on Dylan too much.
Try not to hate on Dylan too much. I hate on Dylan just the right amount.
But this one I have to speak out against because it's so dangerous and antithetical to the First Amendment. Newsflash, Dylan, a free press has the right to misgender you or call you by a different name or say whatever they want about you.
Or say whatever they want about you. I think what people often forget about free speech is that it does not mean free of consequence. You can say whatever you want. Someone's not literally putting a gag on your mouth or taking away your computer from like writing an article, but you saying certain things will come with certain consequences. And that's not taking away free speech, but that's just saying, hey, if you say things that go into the realm of discrimination and hate, then there will be consequences to that.
And if you want your friendly press to have the right to refer to you by your preferred pronouns and write good things about you, you've got to support both. Also, somebody as controversial as Dylan Mulvaney should understand the value in free speech because a lot of people find Dylan's content deeply offensive and objectionable. If offensive stuff is going to be censored, newsflash Dylan, that might mean you.
And you think that Dylan isn't receiving significantly more backlash for just being herself and speaking about trans topics than these articles and these journalists are for literally misgendering her and discriminating against her as a transgender woman. There's a difference between saying something that offends people based on opinion and then there's saying something that is one, factually incorrect, and two, discrimination.
I get being mad about articles you don't like, but don't support censorship.
Yes, I sighed. It's tiring. This person's views are tiring.
My name is Max. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a
Hey Max, my name is Austin. I am that 40-year-old detransitioner that you say you'll never be.
It would have been nice to see more of the original video, but sure.
And I want to say that I also thought when I was your age that I would never ever detransition either, that I 100% knew who I was then, there, and I would always be unfalteringly unchangeable. You know, I really believed that.
There is a 1% regret rate. There are clearly some people that transition and it's not the right thing for them to do, and there would have likely been a point in time where they felt like it was the right thing for them to do, but it doesn't mean that it is the wrong thing for everybody. I'm assuming this video has been made in response because the original says PSA, stop listening to the detrans movement. I haven't seen the original videos, so it's kind of difficult from my perspective as a trans man. I'd say, like, when I hear like detrans movement, that's typically referring to detransitioners who then, after they've detransitioned, actively campaign against trans people having access to healthcare and start sharing transphobia and being transphobic themselves because they did the wrong thing for them. But I don't know any trans person who feels negatively or wishes to silence detransitioners who are also respectful of people who transition and it's the right thing for them to do.
I transitioned really young too, but obviously in a much different time and a much different socioeconomic bracket than what I kind of perceive you to have grown up in.
That feels like quite a big assumption. Yeah, sure.
And that's no shade, that's just the real tea. But I think it's really dangerous for you to come on TikTok and say that people shouldn't listen to the detrans movement just because you may or may not disagree with some of our politics or may not ever see yourself detransitioning. I saw you kind of backpedal a little in your response stitch to Lucy, and it just has me a little bit confused because truthfully, if gender is a spectrum, why do we have to try to change anything? Why can't you just be you, you know?
That sounds very much like the why can't you just be a masculine woman that gets said a lot to trans men. There's a thing where it's like, if you detransition and you don't identify as trans, you deserve support in your journey and acceptance, and nobody should be shitting on you for your journey and for what you've experienced, right? At the same time, if you've detransitioned, it's not your place to speak about the trans community in terms of like whether trans people should have access to healthcare and whether transitioning is the right thing to do and all of this stuff. I think they become separate issues of detransitioners and trans people, and there is no rivalry or animosity between the two.
You know, why are you pushing so hard? Not you specifically, but why is like big trans pushing so hard to make sure that children are medicalized? Like,
big trans. There are a lot of like themes already in like the minute that this video has been going on that very much screams like detransitioner who now has a negative viewpoint of transitioning and puts that negative viewpoint of transitioning and projects it onto the whole community. And medicalizing children, it's been discussed so much, the fact that young kids do not have access to permanent medical transition related healthcare, and it's primarily social. It's even really difficult to access puberty blockers. So this concept that people like
big trans are pushing children to be medicalized,
that's a really not nice and very untrue statement to say about the trans community.
You have no idea what 20 plus years of HRT will do to your bladder or your endocrine system or your urethra. I do. It's not what you think.
I've literally never heard this. There are the side effects, the changes, the positives, the negatives are outlined when you first start hormones. And urethra? I have the bladder and the urethra. Been on T for over 12 years, never had a single issue with anything that's just been mentioned. Have never heard of anyone else having a single issue. The only time I've heard of people having urethral issues is if they have complications after surgery. But these are typically relatively easy fixes. I'm very confused, and it reminds me of this other video I saw that was a lot more overt in the whole like I've detransitioned, which means nobody should transition, and just made up a lot of stuff that like transitioning just does not do. They were saying that taking hormones changes your whole body structure and makes you in constant pain, and it's like, that's not true.
It's not what you think. It has irreversible side effects and damages. Puberty blockers are not reversible. They're absolutely not reversible.
Thing about puberty blockers is they are, and any potential side effects are known and are monitored for, and if any occur, just as with any other medication, then treatment is either stopped or a dosage is changed. People who have this energy about trans kids taking puberty blockers should also have this same energy about any kid that takes puberty blockers for precocious puberty. Puberty blockers have been given to kids to pause puberty for decades, and nobody cared about it until it started benefiting trans kids, and that's when everybody came out the woodwork going, puberty blockers are bad, oh, but only for trans kids. Make it make sense.
I know that's the big narrative that they are, but everyone I've ever talked to that's on it, your puberty never comes back correctly. You're always stunted.
This feels very much like I'm speaking from my very, very individual point of view, not talking about what's actually in the medical literature and the fact that the gender affirmative approach, including for kids, is the approved approach by like every major medical board. It's not the appropriate thing to do to take an individual experience and be like, okay, I'm going to project this, or like this anecdote I heard of a friend that I'm not even sure if it's completely directly linked. Like, how do we even know? I'm sorry, I'm going to turn to the actual like medical professionals that specialize in this and the scientific papers that have researched these effects. And that's where I'm going to base my opinion on this.
It's not like we're some cabal of detrans people that want to hurt trans people. No, I still feel like I will always be a trans person. So no one is going to take that right from me.
I've never heard of that before. I'm not disrespecting it as a concept. I've just never heard of someone who is a detransitioner saying they still feel like they're trans unless they have purposefully paused their transition because of their current circumstances. The most common reason to detransition is because people are not in a safe environment to be trans. So they go back in the closet, they detransition, and then a majority of them retransition when they're in a better position and a safer environment. That's the only time I've ever heard somebody say, I've detransitioned, but I'm still trans. It's also very difficult to hear this person say like, oh, there's not some like big group of detransitioners, but then describe trans people as like
big trans.
Yeah, like a majority of detransitioners will not be transphobic. And trans people do not have an issue with detransitioners who do not then turn around and be transphobic, because of course, anybody being transphobic, detransitioner or not, trans people are rightfully going to be upset and going to defend themselves and their community.
To speak of that, to speak to my truth and just share like what 20 plus years of trans identity can do to a person.
Has done to you for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't right for you to transition. I'm not going to speak on the personal circumstances of this person, as they should not be saying, I'm speaking about my experience, but also projecting it onto others. I don't sit here and go, oh, because transitioning was right for me, that means it will be right for everybody. No, I don't sit there and say that. I share my experiences. It's not my place to use my individual experience to tell others how to live their lives or what is right for them. I can provide information. The only time when I would say things as a group is if I'm referring to actual general statistics and evidence-based things that we know about, and then I'm talking about it as actually the science and not saying, oh, well, because I think this or because I've experienced that. And I feel like this person is actually going, oh, well, because I've had a bad experience, then therefore I think everybody is, and I need to share this. And it's like, talk about it, great, but that's your experience. It doesn't give you a right to then say that trans people shouldn't have access to healthcare, or call trans people big trans, or say they're medicalizing children.
It's not all perfect. It's not all easy peasy. Life gets harder and harder and harder. Now, I think that
for this person,
when you're female to male, maybe your experience will be different from a male to female. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I come from a time when there was so much more internalized and externalized homophobia out in the world, but that's not the case anymore. America has accepted gay people and lesbian people and trans people.
Really though? How many active anti-LGBTQ bills are there in the States right now? The ACLU is tracking 484 anti-LGBTQ bills in the US. nearly 500 across 50 states. There are some states that have 16 plus anti-LGBTQ bills that are currently active as of 2024. They include things like curriculum censorship, other school restrictions, school facility bans, redefinition of sex, school sports bans, other healthcare barriers. So don't stand there and say that America has accepted the LGBTQ plus community. Society-wise, on an individual level, there is a lot more acceptance than there used to be, but there is some very loud and very powerful and very political pushback against LGBTQ plus people, particularly the trans community right now, that I think it's very unfair to stand and say, oh, well, you have acceptance, because it's not there.
Right-wing people don't want to, kill you or cause a genocide. Like, that's absolutely not true.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who was that American politician? What did he say? Oh, here we go. CPAC speaker calls for eradication of transgenderism and somehow claims he's not calling for elimination of transgender people. You say you don't want, well, transgenderism isn't a word, but you say you don't want people to be trans. So he said, for the good of society, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level. Just gotta leave that there.
That's absolutely not true. What we want is to make sure that children are old enough to make informed consent. And you can't do informed consent if you are unable to be informed about lifetime effects.
Does this count for all medical procedures performed on children then? I'm assuming they would also have to stretch that to parents not being able to consent on their behalf. It opens up a lot of ethical questions. It was a big thing in the UK that opened up the ethical question of what 16, 17-year-olds could consent to medically. And by removing the ability to consent to one thing, it raised questions about their ability to consent to other things that people didn't want to stop. And it's just within the sphere of medical and healthcare, there very much feels like there is this one viewpoint and narrative being driven that trans people don't know themselves, and you have to be this very certain age in adulthood to be able to know it. And it always starts with kids, though. That we've seen this in a few places in the States, where it begins with,
hey, under 18s can't transition.
And then suddenly it's
actually, under 25s can't transition.
And it just gets older and older until eventually what we're seeing calls for is we just don't want people to transition. It has been shown time and time again and evidenced time and time again that access to transitioning, both social and medical, does improve the well-being of trans people, and the gender affirmative approach is the accepted approach for trans people. I of course feel sympathy when people have gone down a path that is not right for them and they have difficulty with that, but I absolutely do not think it gives them the right to say that it's wrong for everybody. And this very much feels like a projection of, I did something that I don't like and that wasn't right for me, and therefore I don't think people should do it. And it's no, let's not go there.
I have a friend who has a trans kid. He's explained that, my child from a very young age consistently said, I am a girl, and has never contradicted themselves, never changed their mind. And so the humane thing, and the thing that he felt was good to do as a parent, was to embrace that choice on his child's part.
Sure, yes, why not? By professionals and specialists, that's what people are told to do, to embrace how your child wants to express. Why there is a car underneath, I don't know. I'm finding it very distracting.
I shouldn't even phrase it as a choice, embrace that identity.
But it is a choice. If you're choosing to add hormones to a child's body, that's a choice. If they think that they're a girl, why do you have to give them hormones to make them more of a girl?
Who do you think is getting hormones? I find it very confusing. I think people are just fully convinced that 5-year-olds are being given hormones after saying for a month that they want them. It's not a choice to be trans, and it's not a choice to need to transition. And people are given the appropriate care, social, medical, at the appropriate time. Also, it's not that trans people need to medically transition to be more of their gender. It's to help something called gender dysphoria and to help trans people feel more comfortable in their bodies. Taking testosterone didn't make me more of a man, but it just reduced my gender dysphoria greatly and meant that I am a happier man.
Because... I'm sorry, can you expand on the question?
It's a simple question. If the child thinks it's a girl, let it be a girl.
What is it with the use of it? If the child thinks it's a girl, I mean, yes, let them be a girl.
Why are you adding hormones? If you're shooting hormones into a child and you're affecting the child's development, you're saying that's not a choice. That's nonsense. Of course it's a choice. You're choosing to chemically change this child's body.
He does realize that hormones come out naturally at puberty, right? And that is the age at which a trans child at the earliest would receive hormones, when there would be hormones naturally occurring in their body anyway. So what, is it just not appropriate for anyone under the age of 18 to go through puberty because we should not be letting things added to their body that chemically changes them?
Oh no, hormones bad for under 18s.
Weird. This has been much longer than the standard TikTok video. Oh my god. There was a lot to go through. That was a lot. And I'm done. I can't do any more. Let me know what you think. Basically, in short, I don't understand transphobia. I don't get why so many people like put calling out transphobia and being transphobic on the same level, and they're like,
oh well, like we all have a right to free speech, and like, you know, if you're getting upset over transphobic things being said, then you can't get upset when people get upset over what you're saying.
And it's like, but the difference is somebody's literally just sharing about their life and who they are as a person and doing so very authentically, and then on the other hand, somebody's completely disrespecting who they are and saying things that either intentionally or unintentionally cause a lot of hurt to the trans person. So why those are put on the same level, I don't understand. And I just think that people have become so obsessed with the trans community. It's just become an obsession for some people at this point. And I think it's ridiculous, and transphobia in any form is hurtful and wrong. We see things like insidious transphobia that's very gently said, and it's like, oh, I'm saying this with love and peace and hugs, but I just
I don't think trans kids should be allowed to transition.
Or they're spreading lies and saying that, 5-year-olds are getting hormones, which they're not. And then there's very different standards put on trans people as compared to cis people, particularly in terms of medical things and particularly in terms of trans kids transitioning. And I just find it all so frustrating. It just boils down to people not respecting the fact that trans people are their gender. And if that's the way you feel, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just here to share my journey and the factual truth about the trans community, which is that trans men are men, trans women are women, non-binary people are non-binary. And yes, non-binary people exist. There are more than 2 genders. And what I'm doing by calling out transphobia is not saying you need to change your opinion, but it's like, this is why it's wrong and this is why it's hurtful. Do with that information what you will. Yeah. Leave your comments down below. Think about giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.